Hello, my name is Michael Wickerson, and I'm going to show a very quick path into learning Rhino through Grasshopper. And this is for the absolute beginner. I'm doing this for the classes I teach at the Kansas City Art Institute upon request of one of my students asking me to do a video record so they could review my lectures. I do produce videos at Wickerson Studio, and there's 3 years of videos worth looking at here if you want to jump in on all different playlists and ideas. But without further ado, let's jump over to Rhino. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to load it up and set it up and get it kind of oriented similar to what you see here. I have certain standard visibility, viewport layout, C-plane sets, and player. Not all of that's important. I like to have my properties, my layers, my rendering, my materials, my help, my tutorial help, maybe notifications, and set camera, and hopefully set views on here. I don't know if set views is on there. And then I like to squish this just to two sides so you can see things paired. The only thing you'll be required to do in Rhino to learn this tutorial and to keep moving forward with me, because it is learning Rhino through Grasshopper, is you'll have to learn how to make a point. You'll also have to learn how to make a line, and you'll have to learn how to make a curve, and you'll want to learn how to make a basic surface, and I can do a simple surface from 4 points or 3 points. You will want to learn how to at least put things over to shaded, so you can see geometries, maybe not render, but shaded, because I keep slipping up. And you'll want your right and front viewports as well. And the only other object you'll probably want to make is a boundary representation. And there you go. Everything you pretty much need to do in Rhino to get started in Grasshopper. So what you would do is type in the word Grasshopper into your command line. You don't have to worry about object snaps or grid snaps or gumballs or anything like that, because we're not actually going to work in Rhino. That's about as complex as we need to get to start. Of course, Grasshopper is a subset, so commands and the nodes and components within Grasshopper come from a pretty thorough understanding of Rhino. But you can certainly start Rhino jumping directly into Grasshopper as far as I'm concerned. So let's click the little Launch Grasshopper button and open up our canvas. Yours will look a little different than mine. I'm going to move my video over here, if I can get it to jump over here. And I'm going to slam my Rhino off to this side and shrink my additional help on the side and bring my Grasshopper canvas right over to here. And that's all you really need to start. Now, what I want to go through in a quick introduction are the most essential things to know about to start working in Grasshopper. And it's extremely minimal. I will spend time on params tab. I will spend time on curves. I will spend time on intersections, and I will spend time on transformations. And that's about it to get us started. First thing you want to notice when looking at Grasshopper is you have all of these hexagon-shaped forms, which are containers. They're not components. It is not important that you learn about points, vectors, curves, lines, particular to these nodes. It's best that you just learn how to use the geometry node. You put in geometry, and it says it needs something, data to be collected. So you grab something like a point over in Rhino, you right-click here, you set one point, that node's up and running, and you have what is referred to as a ghosted point in Grasshopper. Because we're drawing some geometry from the Rhino Windows environment, we actually want to internalize that data so we no longer need this data. And what you have is this kind of ghosted point that's over here blue that doesn't really exist in Rhino, but it's waiting to be baked back into Rhino through the Grasshopper canvas. Let's do the same with another geometry by Control, Copy, and Paste. This geometry, we can simply select our line, and we can drop that in, select one geometry, we can internalize, and we are now able to delete our initial one, and there we go. We have a ghosted point and a ghosted line. Let us continue with Control Paste. Let's take this curve and input it into this geometry, And let's internalize that data so we can delete our curve in Rhino. And let's go so far as to grab our plane and insert one geometry, internalize the data, and erase the geometry in Rhino so we have these ghosted forms. And our last one, which I'm going to take a little bit of time to double click and make our perspective window full, we'll take one more geometry node. And the one trick you want to start looking about is double clicking and typing in the node you might want, geometry, and this will keep track of what you most commonly use. And we can take this geometry, grab our boundary representation solid, set one geometry, internalize, and get rid of our original. And that's about all that takes. And now we have a bunch of different geometries, which is pretty interesting because I could take all of those, hit bake, put them all back into here, select them all as Rhino objects, grab myself an initial, another geometry node, and simply set multiple geometries, and I put them all into this one script. All of them are on here, and we have a point which we could come back to. I'm going to go back here, internalize this data, so I can erase it all again. I can select all of them, one 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 of them, and I can name them. This will be our point. And this will be our line. And this will be our curve. And this will be our plane. And this will be our boundary representation, B-rep. And this will be all geometry. And that's it. You've managed to do what all these containers do in different ways specific to certain things. The next important thing to learn in Grasshopper is why we're dealing parametrically, is we're tying things to number. I like to think that number is actually can be reduced to Boolean zeros and ones. So actually you're really only dealing in Booleans when you're dealing in computers, but we at least will bring down our number slider and see that we have a number slider that slides from 0 with 3 decimal places to 1. If we want to actually go in and edit, we can go in and change things from rational to natural numbers. We can change decimal places. We can have the range and domain, minimum, maximum, and we can specifically set exactly what we want it to be at. A couple of shortcuts that are key for understanding that this tool also is amazing for animating. I could take 40 frames and I could animate this and take pictures of my screenshot as that just ran through. And we'll learn what that's useful for. But a couple of shortcuts for number sliders are, this one has 3 decimal spaces between 0.000 and 1.000. But if I was to go in and type the number 2, I double click and type the number 2, it will automatically think I want an integer number slider between 0 and 10. If I double click and hit 2.00, it will think I want a number slider from 0 to 10 and starts my setting at 2 with 2 decimal places. If I click a number between 10 and 100, it thinks I want an integer between 0 and 100. And if I type in 12.99, it thinks I want a decimal or a float or a double, referring to the language you might be talking about, between 0 and 100. There are many, many shortcuts, like typing in 2, 2, 4, and that will give me an integer slider between 2, 3, and 4, and you'll learn a bunch of techniques with that. But number sliders are essential for understanding in this category. And the only other thing you really want to dig deep into here is the panel tool. The panel tool simply tells you what is in everything as you bring it over. And that's it. That's about all you needed to know in there initially to get started. Over here, of course, there's wonderful things and amazing things like the hops node, which we'll get to. And I've got one plugin here, bifocals, which we could talk about. But I think that's enough for params. If you can get in a sense of dropping in geometry and learning how to just structure these nicely and organize these nicely with these little tool tabs, you pretty much have everything in params to get you started. And I know that doesn't do Grasshopper justice, but teaching an introductory class in 3 hours and trying to get people up and running, this is a great way to do it. Params can drive things, and panel tools can tell you exactly what is in a point, a line-like curve, a planar curve, an untrimmed surface, a closed prep, and then all of those items. What happens in Grasshopper is you cease to deal with single units. You start dealing with lists, and when you start dealing with lists of lists. One other object over here is the param viewer, which I love. It's another way of looking at data. Here it says I have one branch, this gray area, with 5 items on it. Start your counting at 0. If I went here, I would have one branch with 1 item on it, which would happen to be the one branch with the point on it. So we slowly understand, and of course a branch can be viewed as tree data. Doesn't make too much sense here because I haven't grafted it, and I won't go into the details. You can start playing with data tree visualization when you get farther into this. You can ignore that for now. And I would stay with just reading your data, how many paths and how many items are on each path. So that's it for params. And I'll leave it at that, and we will go a little deeper and see where this goes. Learning Grasshopper, the absolute basics to get you working in Rhino. Thank you very much for watching.